Click the links to join the subscribe star, become a channel member here, the various other video platforms. So, women writing Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. Writer doubles down on saying that they always are referring back to the text of the story. You press F to doubt. It's right. The space of it. You have the Peter Jackson interview from 20 years ago where they go, "Yeah, we made a decision right off the bat that we're going to try to be as authentic to the story as possible, not insert our own politics into that." And you look at the modern story, it's like, "Oh, so you guys going to do the same thing with that modern story?" No, not so much. Everything, when you're a globalist, like everything's a hammer. When they have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Everything is a vehicle for propaganda. You look at these small stories. Oh, so yeah, you guys going to be as authentic to the artist's original vision as possible to make this be as immersive in the story as the artist intended. And you look at them and like, we're planning on swapping out the characters that people fell in love with for new characters that are not organic to the story. Why would you do that? It's propaganda. It's propaganda. Oh, okay. So I mean, like propaganda is not that interesting. I mean, it's really hard to do propaganda for a long time before people catch on. Eventually, people get tired of it and turn off Fox and CNN. Anyway, so women writing Rings of Power, and I looked at that statement. I thought, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Can women write Lord of the Rings? I think Lord of the Rings requires a different energy to fully develop the story. Men are not women, they're just different. And to try to pretend otherwise, it's like, yeah, I know. Perhaps it's not politically correct to say that, not everyone is humans aren't fungible. Men have a certain energy, they write a certain way. It is what it is. Thank God you didn't say it on Twitter, otherwise they would come for you with a rope. But so she says that they are capturing the spirit of Tolkien. Roll your eyes back when you read something that's stupid. Gaslighting is when they lie to you in the face of overwhelming counter evidence. They tell you one thing, but objective evidence is clearly telling you something different. They're lying to you, and it's so pervasive. I don't know if they even know they're lying. I mean, they're so deep in this echo chamber. And to be fair, if you're in Hollywood long enough, I think there's a sociopathic contingent of people who are drawn to Hollywood and politics, or like they just don't know. They don't know what the truth is anymore. Like if you were like with Abrams and Lindelof talking about Disney Star Wars for that video yesterday. You go, so what makes a good story? They go, oh, diversity, inclusion, compassion, and kindness. You go, oh, but how does that make a good story? That's not the story. That's propaganda that you're putting overlaying on the story. And for them, just saying diversity is what makes a story good. You're like, oh, so what about the hero's journey? What about the character development? What about redemption arcs? What about like analogies to earlier I don't know, Christian stories or Greek stories or or earlier Shakespearean, usually Shakespeare in the Bible is like most people draw their inspiration. It's like those kind of earlier stories, like a King Lear kind of takeoff or vibe to it. It's like, that's the story. No, just diversity. Diversity is not an answer, dude. Who told this is the participation trophy generation? But it's like these people are working on $300 million movies, and and they're laughing all the way to the bank to write these movies. So she says they're capturing the spirit of Tolkien. I don't think so. They're telling you one thing, and objective evidence is telling you something radically. I mean, you look at the Rings of Power, and then you look up at these people, and they're kind of their smiling Prozac faces, just the benzo red wine group of like Hollywood writers, and you're like, you guys don't even know, like your connection to reality is so far removed. So Lord of the Rings is prepare to be triggered if you're listening to this on the left, which you're probably not, is a European story based on the people and the mythology of the people of Europe. You can argue modern political correctness, but this is not a modern story, and people love the story as it was written. If they want a new story, they should write a book, have people fall in love with the story, and then make a movie on it. Yeah, they got 5 issues planned, or series years of this planned ahead. I don't know if they're going to start filming them back to back or not, which they really should have done right from the beginning. This is going to be it's going to be like, what was the other one, Wheel of Time, Robert Jordan's books, that they made that into a show, believe it or not. You go like, what? I never heard of that show. Yeah, no one else has either. It's on Amazon, I think. Turns out nobody's watching it, so that's yeah, congratulations. I think Rings of Power, which has 1,000 times the name recognition than Wheel of whatever, is going to go the same way. After the next season, it's not going to come out for like another year because of the whole, the Wu flu has slowed things down for them. So even when the second season comes out, man, I think people are over. Like, you'd have to change the story radically. And you look at Amazon, the people in Hollywood, or Amazon Prime Video, it's like, that's not going to happen. It's going to be more this. We're returning to the source material. No, you're not. No, you're not. Just stop lying to us. Nobody believes that. Maybe in a year from now, or 18 months, people will have forgotten. And to be fair, they will. People will forget. It's like you have another chance at the second series. Like, it's just going to be more of the same. It's going to be more this, erasing European people from the stories that European people created. It's like, that's sick. That the whole thing is sick. Anyway, so examples of modern classics. Obviously, Harry Potter was a huge, huge hit when I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. Of course, now she's persona non grata, but when the stories came out, her books were monster hits. She wrote 7 books kids fell in love with. I read them as adults. They were really solid, really well-written stories. It's for kids or adults, like they were really well put together. Instead of Hollywood changing Lord of the Rings, they should find a story that they don't have to change and just make a film on it. Sounds obvious when you say it aloud. So now you ask, why isn't that happening? Why aren't woke stories selling? Why don't the books or movies based on these new ideas, why don't they sell? Why do they have to take an old story that connected with an audience, the bait and switch, and then destroy the story by swapping out the characters who people fell in love with? Because SJW woke stories don't connect with people because they're propaganda. What is propaganda and why does it sell? Well, what it is a story that's not authentic or organic in the terms of Hollywood modern usage. It's people who are pushing a narrative not in accord with reality, but it's more than that because obviously dragons are not in accord with reality. It's a story message that the authors don't believe in. It doesn't resonate with the majority of the audience. It's like the difference between spontaneous applause at or spontaneous laughter versus a conscious thought to put your hands together and applaud. Like woke comedy doesn't get a lot of spontaneous laughter. It just gets conscious echo chamber, like confirmation bias applause to say, yes, we agree with the things you're saying. You're talking about Trump and Christians and fair people, and it's like, yes, we're just going to put our hands together and make a noise to signal to everyone, like, I don't want to be the last one clapping or else the communists will come get me. So a harmful belief system like globalism, but it's not just my subjective opinion. It pushes a dangerous belief that enslaves the majority to benefit a tiny minority, as you've seen repeated throughout history. These kids today, they seem to love communism, but they don't seem to love history books. Communist propaganda, because if they did, they wouldn't love communism, or the Bolsheviks, more importantly. Communist propaganda is a weapon of war used by Marxists to destroy nations. If you ever read the ElfQuest comic, that's an example of propaganda. The goal of the comic was to push a globalist message that is harmful to tribalism. It's pushing a message people know is nonsense, a message that is logically not consistent. You have a long history of tribalism being more successful than globalism, like all of human history. I think most of the animal kingdom also. But it'll work this time, even though the counterface of overwhelming evidence. Yeah, probably not. I mean, that's just how numbers work. That's just the probability and statistics. Probably won't work. I mean, it's failed so many times in the past. Propaganda it's a great diet plan, right? Is pushing. It's great. How do we need to fertilize all these fields? Well, I got 100 million ideas. Propaganda is pushing a dangerous idea and using political correctness and social pressure to manipulate people into accepting it, or at least pretending to accept it in the face of social media pressure. You get to a point of ElfQuest comics where the two different characters meet each other for the sake of the message is coming, like the message is coming, and you get a lecture on globalist current globalist propaganda talking point. And the thing is, you get to that point in the story, and you're like, oh, this is the purpose of the whole story, is just to include these two characters are meeting together, and it's like the message, the message, the message. It's like, yeah, okay, this is not an organic story, like right here. So like if you told the author, like, oh, if we want to change this one part about the story, this one little lecture on this kind of like diversity nonsense, the author would lose their mind, because that was the point of the whole story. Like I don't know how many comics she wrote in that series, but like that messaging, that was why she wrote the story. Everything else is just kind of ancillary to that. So Rings of Power, they're calling anyone who questions it istophobic, which is their favorite thing to do. It's just ad hominem and deflection, because they can't counter the argument, so they have to attack the person making the argument. The goal is to force self-censorship, which they've done very successfully, because globalist Hollywood have brainwashed people into accepting the term as something real. In the sense of human language, it's not real in the sense that organic terms are real, and they develop in response to situations, and words refer to concepts or things that people understand. It's a shifting, manipulative term used to control NPCs, a power term used by globalists to focus hatred against one group of people. They look like you and me. It's a term controlled by the ADL, SPLC, ACLU, and it's not organic. It's only possible to manipulate people into accepting such a term when you have control over the schools, curriculum, the universities, and the media for a long enough time that you're able to brainwash people and use that control to brainwash them very effectively for their entire life, which is what has been done to get us to this current Weimar hellhole. I wish I was expert in language and propaganda, because I know that it has been studied and there are terms that describe its behavior exactly. In 1984, it was called wrongthink. In communist countries, they were referred to as records of progress, and you knew that the NKVD was going to knock on your door at 4 in the morning and take you away to be a slave in the gulag, which is exactly what they did. Think how effective the brainwashing has been. Fascist is the pejorative that NPCs know. It's the only thing they're comfortable with, while Marxist, communist, globalist, Bolshevik are not used as such, because the West media is controlled by Bolsheviks and not by fascists. By all metrics, Bolshevism is orders of magnitude more dangerous than being fashionable, but Hollywood and government schools are controlled by them, so you don't learn about the communist atrocities. It's just a blank spot on the map. Well, depending on what school you went to, I suppose. Catholic schools are a little bit different. So, is this Lord of the Rings? No, absolutely not. Lord of the Rings was a story by the English, Tolkien, about European mythology. European people matter, their story matters. Putting non-Europeans in their story is not acceptable. It's okay, obviously you're listening to this, you're of European origin. It's okay to advocate for your people and to advance your own interests. And it's something you might not be comfortable with. It's like, because you can brainwash to not be comfortable with it, but it's just simple game theory. And it really puts you in a position of like, oh, you really have no choice. You have to push back on this narrative. Even if a few years ago you're like me, you just didn't give two shits about any of this kind of stuff, because you just didn't think it mattered, didn't know you didn't know what you didn't know, kind of thing. Putting non-Europeans in the story is not acceptable, but they do it because they hate you, and it's part of the humiliation ritual. It really is just that simple. I mean, if you're on social media, if you're on Twitter for 6 months, and you'll see it, like you just see it. And then once you see it, you go, oh, there's a problem here. There's a problem here with the media and the massive control this mainstream media has. It's like 99% of them are pushing this narrative. It's like it's hatred, this venomous, genocidal, incandescent hatred against one group of people. People like your green and blue-eyed heroes, and Hazel. I always forget the Hazel. It's like if you're on Twitter for 6 months, you'll see it in a way that it cannot be unseen. Once you go down that rabbit hole, it's a one-way journey. So now, culture war aside, the story isn't good because it's logically inconsistent. It doesn't make sense to have people who are not of the same tribe live together as if they are of the same tribe. Can you explain that to me as if I'm a child? It looks like Hollywood propaganda, because that's exactly what it is. It's an insult, and it destroys the story. The story was written. It's the alpha and omega, the beginning and the end. This is not the story. This is globalist propaganda by the worst people on earth. Same people on the Epstein Island flight log, or people who are cheering the monsters in Hollywood for so long. Hey, hashtag me too. Oh, that lasted a year, and then we caught the wrong people, and it just disappeared. Words and stories are modern magic. The filthy, filthy vermin in Hollywood subvert and corrupt everything they touch. Let's take a thought experiment. Replace all the African hobbits with Chinese actors. What would you think about the show? Would it connect with you? Or what if you replaced all the characters with Indians? How would that tell the story? Look at the replacement of the Europeans currently with Africans, which you see is in every show. And oddly enough, not with Chinese or East Asians in general for some reason, which it doesn't make sense because the Chinese at least are a huge, huge market and they're a huge percentage of people. You'd expect to see more replacement with them because they're obviously a bigger market than Africans, but you don't for some odd reason. Does it tell the story truly and authentically? Does it tell the story of Tolkien to replace characters? No, and it shouldn't be in the story. And that's where you end it. You go, oh, this is not the authentic, organic story of Tolkien. Why are you doing this? Diversity. That's not an answer. It's a value to you, perhaps, but it's not a value to me because it doesn't tell the story. Diversity. Again, friend, but you're not telling the story. You're telling something other than the story. Well, where does it say they're not in the story? I mean, have you read the stories? That's not, like, you shouldn't be arguing to change something. You should be going, oh, we're going to maintain the true, authentic vision of the story as closely as possible. They know what they're doing. We know what they're doing, and they're gaslighting you, and they're lying to you. And they're producing stories that are not very good. Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, I don't know, whatever stories what's the recent Black Adam I just saw that it's like, I looked at the movie, I didn't even thought about it. Like I'm guessing all these, I'm not as familiar with DC. I'm guessing all these Hawkman characters and the Cyclone character. I'm guessing they're all race swapped. Did they race swap all the characters? Black Adam too. Like I'm guessing you swapped out all the characters. I have to look into it. I'm sure they did. Does it tell an authentic story? It's like, no, it's propaganda. Some propaganda is better than others. Like Black Adam's connected with people. I'm going to do a review on that next. But it's like, it connected with people and made a lot of money. But it's like, is it the story? No, but it's like Transformers wasn't a story, but it had a lot of explosions on screen. And it's like, it told that story that connected with an audience who probably English is not a first language. Like you could sell that story, like stories like that, explosions around the world, just people running around, shooting lightning bolts out of their fingers, and that connects with people around the world because the language that doesn't matter as much. That's why Transformers are so popular around pretty much everywhere. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys. Thanks for the channel membership. That turns out to make a huge, very, very important. I'll see you guys next episode.